The twin suns of Epsilon, Prime Solara, and Viril climbed over the horizon in a riot of molten gold and copper, turning the glass and ceramic spires of New Dawn Station into a spangled city of light. From her vantage on the observation deck, Commander Celine Ortiz watched the solar wind dance upon the ionospheres of the planet below, her reflection a ghost on the reinforced viewport. Every dawn on Epsilon Prime was a spectacle, but today it felt portentous, as though the universe itself held its breath. She allowed herself one deep breath of the station's recycled air, letting the chemical tang of oxygen and trace minerals clear her mind. 3 days ago, the astronomers aboard had detected an odd fluctuation beyond the outer belt, a series of pulses in the scalar spectrum that defied natural explanation. At first, the signals drifted in sporadic bursts. Then, as if gathering courage, they grew coherent, structured. Evening after evening, the data banks filled with patterns of frequencies that begged for interpretation. "Commander," called Lieutenant Arjun Rao, stepping up beside her. His complexion was pale under the glow of the consoles, and dark circles framed his eyes. "Dr. Gupta wants you on Channel 2. He says he's decrypted a segment of the pulse." Celine's pulse quickened. "Acknowledged. I'll be there in 2. As Rao departed, she allowed her gaze to drift toward the station's far reaches. The hydroponic gardens nestled in translucent domes, the maintenance shafts crisscrossing beneath the hull, and the launch bays were the sleek hulls of cargo. Frigates loafed like great metal beasts awaiting orders. The walkway to the intelligence lab hummed beneath her boots. A network of narrow corridors lined with conduits carrying coolant and data strands. She passed the communications array, the nerve center of their deep space listening posts, where technicians monitored hundreds of channels. In one overheard exchange, a junior officer murmured, "We've got English structure here. Number, multi-layered phonemes. It defies anything we've cataloged." Inside the lab, Dr. Arun Gupta stood hunched over a holodisplay, his pale fingers dancing through lines of code that streamed in luminous glyphs. He was a linguist by training and an astrophysicist by necessity, one of the rare specialists, fluent both in ancient tongues and quantum mechanics. He looked up as Selene entered, eyes ringing with a fevered intensity. "Commander, I've run it through every known algorithm. Bayesian translators, neural pattern recognizers, even deep fractal analysis. This isn't random noise. It's a message." Selene leaned in. The hollow projector displayed a 3-dimensional waveform fractal spirals that pulsed in time with an audible hum. Every pulse carried micromodulations variations in amplitude and phase that hinted at layered semantics. "What does it say?" she asked, voice low. Gupta exhaled, fingers trembling. "I can't translate it word for word yet. But I can tell you this. It's a distress signal, a plea for help, across multiple wavelengths simultaneously. Whoever or whatever sent it is calling out in agony." A long silence passed as Selene stared at the spiraling light. The station's soft intercom chime broke the hush. "Commander?" came the voice of Admiral Naresh La, transmitted from his quarters. "Report." Selene straightened. "Admiral, we've confirmed the pulses are intelligent and structured a distress call from beyond the perimeter frontiers." "Copy that. Meet me in the CIC in 30, came his clipped reply. She turned to Gupta. "Keep working. I want continuous updates." He simply nodded. Brows furrowed. The Combat Information Center lay at the heart of New Dawn Station, a cavernous chamber alive with holomaps, sensor arrays, and strategic consoles. Admiral Law stood before a rotating model of Epsilon Prime's star system. Around him, the Council's high-ranking officers, naval captains, intelligence chiefs, scientific advisors sat in tense semicircles. Admiral Law's voice carried a weight born of decades in the unified Earth Council. "Commander Ortiz, Dr. Gupta? He nodded in greeting. Brief us. Celine recounted the findings, the signal's discovery, the preliminary decryption, and the gravity of its plea. Every head in the room turned toward Dr. Gupta when she finished. The linguist swallowed hard and began to elaborate. The message pulses in triphasic layers. The base layer appears mathematical simple primes, geometric constants. The second layer encodes symbolic constructs glyphs that correspond to shapes and motions. The third layer, I believe it contains emotional registers, fear, pain, desperation. A murmur ran through the chamber, Counselor Morel Vost representing. The scientific consortium straightened in her seat. If this is genuine, it's the first evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence and one in dire need. Captain Hiroshi Takeda, commanding officer of the frontier frigate Aurora's Vigil, crossed his arms. It could be a trap. We should quarantine this channel, cut it off, before it lures us into a snare. Counselor Vost's expression hardened. Or it could be the greatest discovery of our era. We owe it to ourselves and our charter as explorers to investigate. She flicked a glance to Admiral Lau. He raised a hand for calm. Both points are valid. The perimeter frontiers have been off limits for centuries after the Hawthorne incident. Legend says ships simply vanished. Madness followed those who searched for them. Yet today, we have incontrovertible proof of intelligence and suffering. The question is, do we act? Eyes flicked between Takeda's skepticism and Vost's fervor. The tension was palpable. Cellini spoke quietly, but with conviction. With respect, gentlemen, every great stride in humanity's history has required risk. We would send a rescue party if this were on Earth. Why not beyond the stars? Let us send a vessel small enough to minimize risk, but capable enough to defend itself armed with scientists, linguists, and a skeleton crew of Marines. A hush fell. Admiral Law leaned back, fingers steepled. Then, after a heartbeat that stretched like an eternity, he nodded. Very well. I authorize the deployment of the UES Aegis. Commander Ortiz, you lead the mission. You have my confidence and my orders. Locate the source of the distress signal, make contact if possible, and assess whether extraction or assistance is feasible. You are cleared to employ defensive measures if threatened. Relief and apprehension. Ward on Cellini's features. She bowed crisply. Understood, sir. The Aegis leaves in 48 hours. Back in her quarters, Celine stared at the photograph pinned to the bulkhead. A younger Celine in full cadet regalia, arms slung around her childhood friend, Lieutenant Sarah Kwan, who had died exploring the outer moons of Titan. The ache of her. Loss had driven Celine to the frontier divisions, seeking purpose, meaning, and if possible, redemption. A soft chime announced incoming mail. She tapped her console. A single message glowed, for luck Arun. Opening it revealed a looped holoclip of Dr. Gupta's daughter Mira, giggling as she tried to fly a model rocket against her father's knees. Mira looked to be no more than 7, her brown curls tied back with a ribbon, Celine's lips curved. She dispatched a reply. Thank you. See you on the other side. Moments later, she found herself at the launch bay, where the mighty halls smelled of ionized steel and fresh fuel. The Aegis lay in dry dock, a sleek, gunmetal blue vessel with defensive turrets and a suite of scientific pods. Crew members bustled about, calibrating sensors, loading supplies, inspecting cryotanks. The ship's name, emblazoned in chrome letters, gleamed defiantly under the floodlights. Lieutenant Zhang, chief engineer, spotted her and jogged over, hand extended. Commander. Systems checked is nominal shields at 80% efficiency, plasma conduits at full throughput. We're ready for launch. Sergeant Miguel Ortega, leader of the Marine contingent, brought Celine a steaming mug of synthesized coffee. Just the way you like it, boss. Bold and with a single sugar packet, but don't tell logistics they're out. She chuckled. I won't. Thank you, Sergeant. As the crew busied themselves, Celine walked the length of the ship, absorbing every detail. She wondered what lay beyond the outer belt, in the depths of the void, friend or foe, salvation or doom. All she knew was that humanity had heard a cry for deliverance, echoing across the stars, and now it was her duty to answer. When the clock struck the hour, the bay doors rattled open, revealing the twin suns and the endless expanse beyond. The Aegis thrummed as it powered up. With a deep breath that carried the weight of countless souls, Celine Ortiz gave the command. Engage launch sequence. Let's show the universe what humanity is made of. And with a roar of plasma and steel, they shot into the unknown. The Aegis slipped through the void like a silver razor, its inertial dampeners humming as gravity wells twisted and bent around its hull. Commander Ortiz stood on the bridge, her gloved hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the viewscreen, where space itself seemed to ripple. Sensors predicted nothing but an empty corridor of star-strewn darkness, but the distress beacon was insistent, pulsing with lethal precision. Lieutenant Zhang's voice crackled over the comm. Approaching. The coordinates, Commander. Outer sensors are spiking gravitational eddies, magnetic anomalies, and subspace distortions all within 5 kilometers. Celine nodded. Maintain course. Let's see what lies beneath this veil. As the Aegis crossed the threshold of the rift, alarms screamed in soft tones warnings of tidal forces warping the ship's frame. Crew members braced themselves in harnesses as the viewport scenery dissolved into a warping blur of starlight and darkness. It was as though they were passing through the mouth of some vast cosmic leviathan. Shields at 40%, 30%. Zhang reported, fingers dancing over the engineering console. Sparks of static flickered across the bridge's holodisplays, but the ship held together. Then, as if breaking through an invisible dam, the distortion collapsed, and the bridge lights steadied. Before them hung the Elithrian city, a monolithic labyrinth of obsidian towers and impossibly tall arches, half-shrouded in drifting cosmic dust. It floated in space like the skeleton of a dead god, its surfaces reflecting fractured starlight in myriad prismatic shards. Collective gasps swept through the bridge crew. By the Council, whispered Lieutenant Rao. It's beyond anything we've ever constructed. Commander Ortiz's jaw set. Scanner sweep. I want structural integrity readings, energy signatures, and life signs, everything. Drone launch bays opened along the Aegis's dorsal hull, disgorging 6 slender reconnaissance probes. Each drone pinged its status. Power nominal, propulsion. Systems green, sensor arrays hot. Ortiz gave the order, and they sped toward the city like hunting fireflies. On screen, the drone's infrared feeds revealed vast plazas overgrown with crystalline tendrils, pale lavender growths that pulsed, faintly with bioluminescent light. Gigantic statues of humanoid figures knelt in eternal supplication, their faces warped by time. Walls bore reliefs of alien script intertwined with geometric fractals. Here and there, faint thermal readings flickered at a rate of 0.2 hertz barely. Perceptible, but unmistakably sentient. Life signs, said Lieutenant Zhang, voice awed. Very weak, but they're there, deep beneath the central spire. Celine exchanged a glance with Dr. Gupta, who stood behind her, face pale but eyes alight with curiosity. Deploy ground team, she ordered. Sergeant Ortega, you lead. The Marines, Dr. Gupta and Lieutenant Rao, you're with me. The drop pod's descent tore through the vacuum, slamming onto the city's obsidian pavement with a resonant crack that echoed through empty corridors. The pod's hatch hissed open, breathing recycled air into a cathedral of silence. Ortiz led the way, motioning for power packs to engage. Every exosuit glowed a soft blue as its systems initialized. Ree swept his rifle arm with trembling reverence. "It's beautiful." Celine gave him a stern glance. "Stay focused." Ortega's Marines fanned out, pulse rifles raised, scanning every dark archway. The only sound was the rhythmic crunch of their boots on glass-like flooring and the hum of life support systems. They followed holotags projected by the drones, winding through plazas dotted with crystalline flora. Each step took them deeper into the city's heart, toward the majestic central spire that pierced the abyssal sky. Along the way, they passed a shattered amphitheater where countless empty seats formed concentric rings around an obsidian stage. Gupta bent to examine markings along the rimma, series of glyphs that shimmered faintly under his translator's light. "These look like temporal markers," he murmured. "They denote cycles, perhaps years or eras. This city may have stood for millennia." A sudden tremor rattled the stones beneath their feet. Dust and crystalline shards rained down from high above. Ortega barked, "Ambush positions," but no enemy emerged. Instead, from the shadows spilled a cascade of glittering motes particles. Of cosmic dust that drifted away to nothingness. Ortiz clenched her jaw. Whatever built this place had mastery over space and time. "Keep moving." They came at last to a yawning chasm at the spire's base. An obsidian staircase spiraled down into agony-black depths, lit only by veins of bioluminescent crystal. Through come units. The squad's hearts seemed to thrum in unison with the faint pulse of life deep below. "Energy readings spike here," said Rao. "This way." Into the darkness they descended, each step sucking the warmth from their bones. The humid air smelled of ionized metal and something ancient. Far below, a cavernous hall stretched before them, a vast chamber dominated by a throne carved from living crystal, its facets reflecting ghostly light. Seated upon it was the Elythrian figure, tall, regal, draped in silvery robes that glowed. Faintly, her crystalline mask obscured her face, but her presence filled the room with a wordless authority. Before her hovered a translucent sphere, shimmering with the same fractal patterns as the distress signal. Dr. Gupta gasped. "Queen Syria." The Elythrian rose with a grace that belied exhaustion. Her voice resonated telepathically, a chorus of harmonies that reverberated in their minds. "Welcome, children of Earth." Ortiz stepped forward, phalanx of Marines. At her back, "We come in peace, bearing your signal." "We mean to help." Queen Syria's head tilted. "Help? Yes. We have waited long for deliverance." Gupta activated his holotranslator. On the crystal throne, glyphs lit up in correspondence. In fractured English, the message took shape. "I, the last queen of the Elythrians, beseech you. Our world perished. Our civilization shattered by the war god we bound. Now its prison weakens, and we crumble. Free us, or let us perish in peace." A hush fell. Even the Marines had lowered their rifles, enthralled by the tragic beauty of the scene. Ortiz's voice was steady. "Tell us how we can help." "We have weapons, technology. We can stop your war god once and for all." The Elythrian queen's crystalline mask fractured with faint lines of light. "Your weapons are fire against flesh. The war god is forged of void, of unmaking. Only the fusion of Elythrian might and human ingenuity can reforge its prison. But the cost." She raised a hand, and within the sphere flickered images of stars collapsing, of entire fleets swallowed by shadow. "We, too, must serve the seal with our essence. Should we fail, all shall fall." Sergeant Ortega exchanged a glance with Ortiz, uncertainty in his eyes. The Aegis's arsenal was formidable, but a metaphysical war god? This was beyond any battle plan they'd ever known. "Give us the terms," Ortiz said softly. "We'll do what it takes." Syria lowered her hand. Then let the covenant be forged. In that moment, the chamber seemed to pulse in agreement. The translucent sphere shimmered with newfound intensity, and the Elithrian throne glowed, as though lighting the way into the abyss. Beyond them lay the final confrontation, where flesh and crystal, science and sorcery, would converge in a crucible of cosmic fire. And as humanity's marines gathered their courage, and scientists readied their equipment, the war god waited its eldritch hunger stirring in the dark beyond the spire, eager to rend the stars anew. The obsidian walls of the Elithrian chamber thrummed with ancient power, their surfaces alive with fractal patterns that pulsed in time with the queen's crystalline heartbeat. The translucent sphere before her flickered, casting prismatic shadows that danced across the faces of Ortiz's ground team. Each reflection carried the weight of eons of triumph and ruin, sacrifice and sorrow. In that silent exchange, human and Elithrian stood poised at the threshold of an alliance born in desperation. Queen Syria descended from her throne with a grace that belied exhaustion. Her silvery robes whispered across the crystalline floor, and her mask, etched with fractal runes, glowed softly. Commander Ortiz felt both awe and an unbidden kinship, as if two lines of destiny had crossed at the farthest edge of known space. Ortiz swallowed. "Your Majesty, we stand ready. Tell us what must be done." Syria's voice resonated telepathically, a chorus of sorrow and resolve. "We bound the war god at the cost of our lifeblood. Our ancestors forged its prison using living crystal and sacrifice, melding soul and matter in chains of light. But with each passing age, our power waned. Now the seal fractures with every beat of the universe's heart." Dr. Arun Gupta stepped forward, holotranslator in hand. "You speak of living crystal catalysts that can channel both energy and spirit. Is there a way to reinforce this prison with our technology? Our fusion reactors, our directed energy matrices?" Syria's hand drifted to the sphere, and it rippled. "Yes and no. Your weapons are wrought of fire and destruction brute force. Alone, they cannot bind a void-born entity. But if you grant us raw energy charge or crystals with human engineered power, they will resonate across the dimensional threshold. The war god's essence can be lured, caged once more." Lieutenant Zhang's brow furrowed. "We can modulate the Aegis's reactors, channel plasma bursts through crystalline conduits. But the scale, it would drain our power reserves entirely." Sergeant Miguel Ortega, flanked by Marines, quietly interjected, "And what of your people? You said your life essence is the seal. Are you prepared to offer yourselves to this binding?" Syria lowered her head. "Every Elithrian present will merge spirit with crystal. Our blood becomes mortar, our souls the pillars that hold the cage. When the war god stirs, we must amplify the resonant frequencies with our hearts." Ortiz felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. This was a pact of mutual sacrifice. Humanity granting its arsenal of energy, the Elithrians giving the remainder of their lives. She glanced at her crew, at Rao's pale determination, at Gupta's trembling resolve, at Ortega's steady, unflinching gaze. None faltered. This was what they had come for. "Then we consent," Ortiz said, voice steady. "We will provide the power, and you will bind the war god together." Syria's mask fractured with thin lines of white light, as if a weary smile. "So be it." Back aboard the Aegis, the atmosphere crackled with tension and purpose. In the engineering bay, Lieutenant Zhang stood before the main reactor core, an orb of coiled plasma contained by superconducting magnetic fields. Around him, Elithrian crystals were arrayed on reinforced pallets, each facet carved with runes that glowed faintly when idle. Technicians in human Elithrian liaison uniforms hovered at consoles, calibrating power taps and phase couplings. Zhang addressed the assembly over the comms. We have 3 hours until the seal window opens. Dr. Gupta, are the crystal stabilizers oriented? Gupta, surrounded by hollow schematic overlays, responded, yes. Each node aligned with the spatial resonance vectors. We'll need to synchronize. Plasma bursts to the crystal's half-cycle phase. It's delicate. Sergeant Ortega's Marines formed a protective ring around the array. Their pulse rifles were offline. The rough metal weapons seemed incongruous in a chamber of living crystal, but they stood guard nonetheless. Ortiz watched from the entrance, her uniform unmarked, her face drawn. Remember, she said quietly, if anything goes wrong, we withdraw. No one stays behind. Ortega nodded, though his eyes betrayed pride. Understood, Commander. Gupta tapped his console. Phase 1 complete. Initiating power transfer. A low hum rose as plasma conduits ferried energy into each crystal cluster. The runes flared bright white, then settled into a steady azure glow. The outward-facing crystals duetted in harmonic resonance, and Ortiz felt a distant vibration in her bones, as though the ship itself had become a chord in an immense cosmic symphony. Then the lights dimmed. Alarms pulsed red. Lieutenant Zhang's voice crackled urgently. Threshold breach. The war god senses the ritual its presence is bleeding through. Ortiz's heart thundered. All hands to stations. Activate point defense lasers. Marines, ready for containment breach. Outside, the viewports turned to swirling storms of violet-black energy. The hull groaned under tidal forces that bent space itself. In the corridor, the Marines' helmets lit up as they sealed bulkheads against encroaching void wraiths shadowy, forms flickering at the edge of vision. Syria's voice, calm and unwavering, resonated in their minds. Begin Phase 2. Ripple the crystals. Draw it near. Ortega barked. On it. He pressed a sequence on the Elithrian console. The chamber's crystals pulsed in cascading arcs, emitting waves of light that fractured the shadow at the windows. Each pulse drew the war god closer, its tortured howls rippling through coms. Like static-laced screams. Then came the moment of unity. Ortiz keyed her communicator. Bridging strike team. Channel grid 1 through 4. Let's lock this down. A surge of power coursed through the ship's conduits, tearing arcs of plasma into the crystal clusters. The crystals answered with a deafening chorus of light, sending a shockwave that slammed into the rift outside. The void storm writhed, then paused as though in agony, and then recoiled, shattering against the crystal matrix like water upon steel. The chamber trembled, fissures spidering across walls. Syria's voice grew stronger, a chorus of thousands. Now seal the gate. Ortega and his Marines flung open the final gate valves, releasing containment fields that snapped into place with a starburst of white light. Outside, the rift collapsed in on itself, folding space until it shimmered like a closed eye. When the dimensional tide stilled, the swirling void was gone, replaced by the silent stillness of deep space. Inside the engineering bay, lights flickered back to normal. The crystal runes dimmed, their final sacrifice made. The isolation walls disengaged. And in the stillness that followed, Ortiz heard the faintest heartbeat, a singular, crystalline pulse echoing in the chamber. Dr. Gupta exhaled, voice unsteady. It's done. The seal holds. Syria's image flickered on the hollow projector, her form pale, robes torn, mask cracked. The covenant is fulfilled. You have given us hope. We have given you memory. Carry it well, Commander Ortiz. Ortiz stepped forward, voice thick. We will. Safe passage back to your world, or into the next. Syria inclined her head. In peace or in rest? And as her form dissolved into motes of light, the Elithrian queen faded, but her legacy endured in the silent crystals left behind, their harmonies woven into the hull of the Aegis. Humanity had forged a bond in the crucible of cosmic fire. And though the cost had been immense, they had answered a cry for deliverance and discovered the profound strength of an unspoken covenant. Beyond the stars, the war god lay dormant, trapped once more by the unity of two species. But in the hearts of Ortiz and her crew, a question lingered. What price would the universe demand next? The answer would come with the dawn of humanity's newly forged alliance, and with the embers of destiny still blazing across the void. The Aegis coasted through the aftermath of the collapsed rift, its hull still echoing with the distant tremors of cosmic realignment. On the bridge, Commander Celine Ortiz stood before the observation viewport, gazing at the silent field of debris, where the Elithrian city once hovered. Among the drifting crystalline shards, faint pulses of bioluminescent azure winked out one by one signals of a civilization that had given everything to imprison a primordial terror. Status report. Ortiz commanded, her voice steady but laden. Lieutenant Zhang's fingers danced across his console. Reactor integrity at 90%. Crystal conduits remain stable, but inactive, no residual power. Life signs from the Elithrian cohort are minimal. His eyes flicked to Gupta's station. Dr. Gupta's usually vibrant face was etched with exhaustion. All but the queen and two binders have transcended, their essence fused with the crystal matrix. The final pulses recorded align with the collapse of the central override glyph. They're gone. A hush fell over the bridge. Ortiz closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Then they did not survive. Sergeant Ortega, leaning against the rear bulkhead, nodded soberly. Their sacrifice sealed the war god. We have no right to mourn not yet. Ortiz turned to the crew arrayed before her. Marines still in their crystalline blunted armor, engineers monitoring the dormant conduits, linguists transcribing the final runes. They were weary, haunted, but alive. Set course for the nearest. Jump point, she ordered. We'll chart a course back to New Dawn with the Crystal Archive. As the Aegis powered its engines, Ortiz retreated to her ready room. She dropped into the chair where she had once planned rescue, only to find herself confronting loss of a magnitude she could scarcely bear. On her desk lay the Queen's crystalline glyph key, an iridescent shard etched with the last vestiges of Elithrian script. Ortiz lifted it gently, turning it over in her hand. Each facet shimmered with ghostlight, an echo of voices long silent. She activated the holo interface. Maps of star lanes and jump point coordinates unfurled, but her thoughts drifted to the war god's distant prison. Somewhere in that darkened chasm, an unseen sentinel now lay chained by human reactors and Elithrian sacrifice. The echo of its rage had dissipated, yet Ortiz felt its presence in her bones, a wary promise that even a reforged seal could one day falter. 3 days later, the Aegis dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Epsilon Prime's system. The twin suns hung low, their light gilding the horizon of New Dawn Station. As the vessel approached, a swarm of commuter shuttles and orbital drones swirled around them, like moths returning to Flame Dot in the docking bay. Ortiz disembarked alongside a small party, Dr. Gupta bearing data cores, Lieutenant Rao with sensor logs, and Ortega carrying a ceremonial Elithrian crystal. They were greeted by Admiral Narish Lal and Counselor Morel Vost, whose austere composure cracked at the sight of Ortiz's ashen face. "Welcome home," Lal said quietly, extending a hand out. Ortiz clasped it firmly. "Home, sir, but not as we left it." Counselor Vost stepped forward, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You carried the weight of 2 worlds, Commander, and you prevailed." She turned to Gupta. "Status of the archive?" Gupta placed a data core in Vost's palm. "Complete. The glyphs, the ritual sequences, the psionic resonance profiles, everything we need to preserve Elithrian wisdom." He paused, "and their final testament, that hope is forged in fire." Vost bowed her head. A new era dawns for humanity and for those who listen. In the great hall of New Dawn Station, a memorial service was held beneath soaring arches, festooned with pale blue banners. Representatives of Earth's colonies, scientific delegations, and military brass gathered in solemn tribute. At the center stood the crystalline cenotaph, a monolithic shard fashioned from a Lithian crystal, its surface alive with holographic runes cycling through the names of the fallen. Ortiz, clad in her formal dress uniform, stepped to the podium. The hall fell silent as her voice rang out. 3 days ago, we answered a cry for deliverance that echoed across the stars. We ventured beyond fear and prejudice, not for conquest, but for compassion. In the depths of the void, we found the Elethrians' noble souls who had sacrificed themselves to contain an ancient horror. Their legacy is not one of despair, but of unity, the unbreakable bond formed when disparate peoples joined to face oblivion. She paused, gaze sweeping the crowd. Let us honor their sacrifice by continuing their work, to explore bravely, to build bridges where none exist, and to stand ready whenever suffering calls. May their crystals guide our path, and may their courage ignite our own. As she stepped down, Marines bearing wreaths of bioluminescent flowers approached the cenotaph. The audience bowed heads as the first wreath was placed. In the hush, Ortiz felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon her, hopeful, watchful, inspired. That evening, Ortiz ascended to the observation deck once more. Solara and Virel had dipped below the horizon, leaving a veil of twilight where stars shimmered like distant promises. She held the crystal glyph key in her palm, its light pulsing softly in time with her heartbeat. Lieutenant Rao joined her, offering a flask of tea synthesized with native Epsilon Prime herbs. Ortiz accepted, fingers brushing his. I wondered, will we ever feel the same sense of awe, knowing what lies beyond the void? Rao watched the stars, thoughtful, awe tempered by remembrance. We've seen the price of salvation, but we've also glimpsed the power of solidarity. That's more than myth, it's our inheritance now. Ortiz turned the glyph key to catch a sliver of starlight. We carry their story with us. And if ever the seal falters, or another cry for deliverance rings out, we will answer again, with fire, with compassion, and with unity. Above them, the cosmos stretched infinite, and in its boundless silence, the ember of redemption glowed, an eternal testament to the covenant forged between humanity and the stars.